Thank you all for coming. It's great to see that so many people come from so many different places to this conference. I would like to thank Christophe Grafe and Katrien van der Marliere for their kind invitation to create this exhibition and to host this conference. As Katrien said, it has been a real journey. It has been a real adventure this last year to come to the result that we expose finally today. I put a lot of thought in what I would present tonight, and I would really like to keep the clear distinction between an exhibition and a conference, because when we started the exhibition, we were tempted to expose a conference, and in the end, the exhibition found its own true form, and so I won't be trapped in the idea of showing the exhibition in the conference, but really giving you a real conference as a complement of the exhibition. I'm truly fascinated by aerial photographs. I take many of them out of the airplane. And there is something magic that in the framing of a landscape while flying over it, it becomes understandable, it becomes readable, and suddenly the relationship between topography, hydrography, and vegetation becomes very clear. This is true for natural landscapes, but is also true for human interventions, landscape projects that suddenly reveal, for example here, the soil components in this part of western United States. The polders to the north of us, of course, are a great example of how the construction of the territory works together with a landscape and with an urbanism. And it's really interesting to see, while landing in Belgium, that this kind of coherence is gone, that there's an enormous fragmentation of the different elements of the landscape, and that the relationship between those elements seem to be completely lost. And this has been key in the laboratory of the office, because coming back from 8 years living abroad, living in Paris, I was suddenly confronted with this new view on my own country, which I thought fascinating because so different, and at the same time disgusting because so different. And so this map from the beginning has been the starting point of this research. This map, because as you can see here, this is Belgium. There is some kind of strange condition. Something is going on. It's not the same as what we would find in France, around Paris, around London, or even in Spain. There's a kind of otherness that I was really interested in, and especially interested in how to make a landscape in a piece of territory that is so densely populated. And so we started off with a number of projects in Belgium, and then over the years started to export this methodology that we developed, mostly in France, but also in Moscow, in Tartu, in Helsinki. And it's really interesting with this retrospective to also think back about how things developed. The first commission I got when I started the office was a commission by the Flemish government architect about residual space in Flanders. And the question was how to design residual space in Flanders. And it's at that moment that I came up with the idea that actually you cannot look into the landscape of Flanders to know what to do with residual space, but you can actually use residual space to make landscape. And the study was officially called Residual Space in Flanders, and we recalled it, or we renamed it, Strategies for a Land Without a Landscape. That was in 2007, and of course that was a provocation, and it was especially a kind of provocation to myself to think how can we make a landscape in this very difficult land where no natural features give us a clear idea of what should be done. And so it became very clear that the solution was not to be found in the built space, Brussels, Antwerp, Ghent, and Kortrijk. But actually there's an underlying system that's not very defined, not very hard, but it actually gives a possibility of creating landscape. And I think it's very interesting. I'm going to take this more easy. It's interesting to see that this map and this map is exactly the same scale, but of a very different nature. And we started to rethink the hydrography or the river systems of Belgium. Because in school, we think when we learn rivers that all the rivers are the same. But actually the rivers in flowing through Belgium are of a very different nature than the rivers going into the Jura Delta, like the Maas or the Rhine. And so we through this research, we found out that the flat land, the Low Countries, the flat land, has a very peculiar hydrography system, where you have the Leie, the Schelde, the Dender, the Zenne, the Deile, lying at about 25 kilometers one from another, and creating an irrigation system of a flat land. It is not bringing the water from the glacier to the ocean, it is merely draining the water, the rainwater, towards the sea. And the more a country is flat, the more a plain is flat, the more the little difference in topography create or will indicate where the water will flow. And so looking at those rivers that I just named, we saw that the Leie is 200 kilometers long, the Schelde is 300 kilometers long, the Dender about 80, the Zenne about 100. So if you compare that to the Rhine, that's 2,000 kilometers long. If you compare the height difference between the source and the ocean, which is about 110 meters for the rivers in Belgium, and of course more than 2,000 meters for those big rivers, we understand that we're in a total different situation. A total different situation that can actually create a new vision, a new idea for the organization of open space in the whole of Belgium. And so again, I think for a long time architects have been fixed and focused on this image and in a kind of apocalypse, what to do, it's too late. And it is too late, but we can do something, we can do a kind of inverse action while giving a new space to the waterways that have been canalized in our territory. And this image is really important, and as you will see in my conference, I will show many images. All those images we make ourselves, because in the cartography, in the redrawing, we relearn to read our proper landscape. And I want to say one more thing about that, which will be clear in the exhibition, is that the very important difference between a land and a landscape. A land would be the given, would be the territory, would be what is there right now, while the landscape is the perception, is the way we perceive the existing land. And as Christophe mentioned, landscape, the word has been invented in the lowlands in the 15th century to depict a landscape painting. It's only 500 years later that landscape was for the first time used to talk about the built environment. So landscape for a very long time was really a painting, a way of seeing reality. And it's Oscar Wilde who states that in order for a land to become a landscape, we need a cultural or an artistic process. And he cites, and I like to use that citation, he says, it's only until Turner, the painter Turner, painted the mist above the Thames in London that we actually started to see the Thames. He says, until then, the mist was there, of course, it's a natural phenomenon, but people didn't see it because they were not used or they didn't learn to see it. And if you think about that, it's true for many examples. Van Gogh revealed the colors of Arles. Cézanne, the mountains in Aix-en-Provence. Giverny was revealed by Monet. There's many examples, and even the national parks in the United States were a result of a commission to Ansel Adams, the photographer, who for the first time showed those mountains as interesting and beautiful pieces of landscape instead of just unexploitable territory. So the image is really central in landscape, and I think it's a big difference with architecture. I think landscape architecture is in that sense much closer to landscape painting than to architecture itself. So the image is key, because in the image, the landscape emerges. I will show you 7 projects. First, Brussels. The image is key, and the image transforms a land into a landscape. So we always start from the land itself, and the best way to start is the aerial photograph, which is which shows you in the most clear way what is visible there on the terrain. And as said, we redraw the different elements of a landscape. For example, in Brussels, we all know that the Senne has been canalized. And you can see here parts of it are still open and parts that are canalized. And so the whole valley of the Senne seems to have disappeared. Of course, it has been doubled by the canal, but of which the water level is lying too low. What's interesting in those readings is that we saw that most of the railroad tracks and most of the freeways are or parallel to the contour lines or perpendicular to them, because they follow a kind of logic of the territory, while the green spaces seem very fragmented and very fragile. And it was, for a long time, I think for 5 years, we have been working on this map during different projects and different competitions. And I was always frustrated by the fact that the Brussels claims to be the 4th greenest city in the world, but its green structure seems not to be connected to the topography, to the hydrography. So it seems vulnerable, since it's not part of a bigger system. And it's only when we started thinking of Belgium at a bigger scale and thinking about the fact that it's not the big rivers, the big valleys that cut through the territory, but it's actually a kind of capillary system, a system with many ramifications, as you can see here. This is the Senne again, with all its tributary rivers, that we thought, maybe we shouldn't look at the Senne, but we should look at all those secondary rivers that feed the Senne. And so we made the exercise again, and that's also very interesting in the cartography. Of course, you build up your own database, and you can always play with the different layers that you've made. So this is the same image as I showed you just before. Then we put the location of those tributary rivers, those secondary valleys, and we saw that actually 80% of the green space was directly connected to the more humid areas around those secondary valleys. So suddenly we thought, that's quite interesting, because we could reinforce those humid areas, and we could create a number, 8 in this case, of catchment basins that would not only help the problem of inundation and keep the water before bringing it to the Senne, but could actually give a new identity to the territory of Brussels. And we thought it's quite fitting, whereas London or Paris would have one central river, that Brussels with its 19 communities would have 8 secondary rivers. 8 secondary rivers for 19 communities seemed much more at the scale and at the politics of Brussels. So the valley itself is not the main green space. The main green space is the secondary valleys. The valley itself has become a valley of parallel infrastructures, as you can see here. For those who know Brussels, on Spachlaan, North-South Junction, Royal Access, and the canal. And so this kind of reading is not linked to a specific project, but gives us a kind of what I called exemplary landscape, the best landscape that we could distill from the existing situation. And this kind of maps really live on in the office as a kind of result of a laboratory, and are then used for specific projects that we would do in the future. So I will continue with 2 projects that we've done and that were helped by this map. One for Tour and Taxis, which is right here, and one for Saint-Lazare, which is right there. Tour and Taxis. So you can see the canal. You can see the site of Tour and Taxis. There's something very interesting, because it was a depot, and it was accessible by trains. A kind of valley was created from Boxstyle. This is the Plaza Boxstyle, until the canal. On old maps, you could actually see those trains, as you can see them here. And they created a kind of artificial secondary valley, if you like, following the contour lines from a higher space, going gradually down towards the valley of the Zenne, represented by the canal. The site itself lies in an enclave, an enclave because of the boulevard and because of the railroad tracks that are surrounding the site. And we were looking at in what way has the valley meant anything for the territory. And we could see that there was a number of existing plantations that would be parallel to the canal and thus parallel to the contour line. So we thought, okay, we lost the Zenne, but these plantations are the direct result of million years of erosion that have created the contour lines on which these plantations or these alignments have been planted. So that's one system. A second system was actually the spontaneous vegetation along the height differences that were created by the railroad tracks. So we thought it's quite interesting to have these two systems that are very different and that could help to define what this enormous open space of tour and taxis could become. And so with this idea of the secondary valleys in mind, we thought, how can we, from Bokstal all the way to the valley of the Zenne, using the different bridges that do exist and that before would bridge the railroad track, how can we give one single image to this very big park that will be built by different authorities, by different landscape architects, and the idea of using the existing vegetation along the height difference, along the talus, to reinforce them and actually bring them all the way to the valley seemed to make sense. Following the height lines and actually revealing the original slope of the valley. And at the same time, these linear plantations that we saw parallel to the canal, to use that system to give an identity to the first part along the avenue of the port, and actually have those two systems marry, one being more natural and connecting to Bokstal, and the other one being more urban and connecting to the canal. This is the existing situation seen from the bridge of Bokstal, and this is a visualization of this park that in the continuity of the 19th century parks in Brussels could create these big open spaces bordered by trees, and especially since we have the topography on our side, create these beautiful vistas on the industrial heritage that you can see here, but also on the north quarter of Brussels. This is the more natural part from the Avenue du Port. This is the existing situation. The park would become a bit more organized, but bring the vegetation all the way to the avenue. Second project in Brussels that was inspired by this broader reading, the competition for the Plazas Saint-Lazare. You can still see a part of Tour and Taxis right here. Now we're looking at the area in between the Botanique, the Botanical Garden, and the North Station. And here, as we said, the one system being the secondary valleys, the other system being the parallel infrastructures. We have the canal, we have the Boulevard Anspach, we have the Royal Axis, and in between, very interesting, we have the North-South junction. And actually, you can see it here from the South Station. It would have been a straight line to the North Station, and at the time, there was two possibilities: or have the train following the Boulevard Anspach, or have the train pushed into the hill, what happens here, follow a contour line, drive out of the hill. And actually, back then, and I'm speaking 1902, the engineers thought that this system would have the least disruption of the city fabric. because a train, of course, would cut the city in two, but still have to make the tunnel. An enormous destruction has taken place, and actually all these buildings have been built after World War II as a representation of the Belgian state. But as you can see, there's a very clean double hierarchy, if you like, of these more planned urban axes within a medieval tissue. And you can see here in the red outline the kind of strange limit that they gave us in the competition, and which was a bit residual space put together into a competition. We were interested in the typologies of these different axes, and unlike Paris, where you have medieval tissue and tissue or avenues from Haussmann, our avenues were not uniform. So we were really looking, and here you can see the kind of typology of buildings that they would bring with them into the medieval tissue. We were looking at the different identities of these axes. For example, the more industrial zone along the canal, the royal axis from the Palace of Justice towards the church Saint-Marie, the commercial axis, or the north-south junction. So we're looking at these different axes and thinking if we could find an identity for each of these different strong lines, they could create this double hierarchy, and they could help organizing the tissue of Brussels. And especially the north-south junction, which cut through the existing city and brought with it a number of peculiar buildings, from the central station to the National Bank to the Cité Administrative, all the way to the Botanique. And you see here the trains driving in, following a control line and riding out again. And then towards the North Station and the North Quarter that has been built in the 70s and the 80s. What was really interesting for us was to see that actually the strange form that had been given to us by the municipality of Saint-Josse coincides with two axes. The former commercial axis of the Rue Neuve with the Rue Brabant, which has been cut by the railroad tracks and by the boulevard. And at the same time, the continuation of the north-south junction running through the Botanique and linking it with the Gare du Nord. So suddenly, because of this reading at the bigger side, things became quite easy or quite evident. We thought, okay, we have to reconnect the commercial axis and especially what's happening on the Rue Brabant connected with what's happening on the Rue Neuve, because there's enormous potential on both streets, so the connection could really link those cut parts of the city with one another, and especially link it with the entrances to the Gare du Nord at one hand, and the other hand, from the Botanique, create a more nice area so that people would visit the Botanique more and would actually be able to stroll along or on the roof of the north-south junction. Gare du Nord, Botanique. So on the one hand, we call it the planted valley, where the trees from the Botanique seem to escape and seem to run down all the way to the North Station. On the other hand, the connection of the commercial axis of the Rue Neuve and Rue Brabant. This is the existing situation. This building will be demolished to build a tower. You can see enormous infrastructure not really going anywhere, which could be reduced to create this connection to the Place Roger, Rue Brabant, and to create this nice pedestrian zone connecting towards the Botanique. Or here, seen from the Botanique to the Gare du Nord, which is right there. Again, a lot of infrastructure, but not leading anywhere, which could be reduced easily to create this very different feel. Because as you can see, the quality is not coming from the buildings, will never come from the buildings in this area. So I truly believe it's only public space that can radically change the image. And that's why we made these images. As you can see, these red pavers, these red bricks could possibly divert the attention from the kind of heterogeneous buildings, if we may say so, and suddenly create an identity also with the plantation of these trees, Cornis controversa, which have a horizontal branching, and that could suddenly create an identity. That's why we call it the planted valley, like a valley flowing through these buildings. We won this competition last year, and also I think because of the way we told them we would develop it, we did this together with Grijs, where we said actually the foundations are perfectly okay, the canalizations have been done recently, so no need to break everything up and redo everything, especially in landscape or in public space. 80% of the money is in the foundations and invisible. So we thought, can we not just take off the top layer, add a new layer, and radically change the image, which is the only thing that needed to be done. When the slopes were too steep, we looked at creating smaller steps, or even using the height difference to be able to plant those trees without touching the existing foundations. And so a whole study, and I'll only show you a couple. We did, I think, about 20 of those prototypes to show how we could easily, with 20% of the money, not 80% of the money, make this change happen. And then we won the competition, and the municipality asked us to organize a kind of little exhibition showing the 5 teams that made a proposal. And actually we proposed them, let's not do another small exhibition, but let's actually make a prototype on the spot. So we took off those typical gray concrete tiles, 30 by 30. We took them off, we kept the foundation, we laid in bricks. We continued on the road. As you can see, there's a metal corner here. This was the curbstone. We used different colors and different patterns to check which ones we would like the most, and especially to also engage the public into this decision, to talk with them about different options. We rented trees for 6 months, and we actually created a very small piece of what we wanted to do on that site. We also rented the benches, and then we organized a meeting right there with the panels, as you can see. But it was interesting to be able to speak about the big picture, the parallel axis, and at the same time tell them, like, this is the stone we want, this is the bench, this is the tree. So those 3 projects in Brussels show how since we're not making objects, how landscape always continues. You make a scheme, the scheme has its own independence and is later on used to create another scheme, and that's again why I really like to see the office as a laboratory where we use commissions to do research. And of course, and an interesting talk about that yesterday, of course we will make the program that we were commissioned, but not only that, we will also make landscape. And landscape is independent of that commission. I will show you that with this project. This is Ingelmünster. It's one of the first competitions I entered in when I came back, together with Office 360 from Ghent, with Jan Mannaerts. 2008, one of the first competitions, we won it. And it was really a great adventure in this very small municipality, 11 or 12,000 inhabitants, to see with the services of the city, of the municipality, what could be done right in the middle of this urban sprawl. I think I have an image of that. Right in the middle of this città diffusa, the Nevelstad, la ville nébuleuse. And I invite everybody to rent a car or take a car and drive from Kortrijk through Izegem, through Ingelmünster, through Roeselare, and to Lille. And not be mind blown, you know. It's just endless. It's the end of public space. It's the end of urbanity. It's the end of centrality. It's just kind of ongoing stuff. And at the same time, it's fascinating. Of course, it's fascinating what to do in this kind of. It's Brodecker City, made in in the 1-on-1 scale. So, okay, so this competition is started, and the mayor asks us to, or asks the participants to develop a scheme around the church and a scheme around the station. And I remember he said in his brief, or when we met him the first time, he said, "Yeah, my community is cut by a canal, and it's really not good because there was two churches. They talked about Ingelmünster North and Ingelmünster South, and I thought it was really interesting because having worked in so many places in Belgium, at least they had a canal. At least there was something. So we started to draw this kind of natural feature that, and of course it's exaggerated. Of course the height lines make you think it's a real valley, but it's in this exaggeration, in this precise reading, that suddenly a possibility of a landscape becomes visible. And we discovered that the canal is actually a doubling of an existing very small stream called the Mandel, but especially that both the marketplace around the church and the plaza around the station are lying at the edge of the valley, which is of course logical because they built a church where there would not be an inundation. But suddenly we thought, it's interesting that those two spaces span the valley. And from the beginning, together with Jan, we were looking at a form or a figure, I think figure is the right word, that could suddenly create a kind of centrality within this endless urban sprawl. And at least you drive through Ingelmünster, you know you've passed through the center. And it was really interesting because, of course, it was more ambitious than what they had in mind. At the same time, they knew they needed a new bridge. We were smart enough to put Laurent in our team. And only a couple of months ago it has been decided that the Flemish government will pay for a new bridge linking this part that we have built in the last couple of years with this part that we will build in the next couple of years. So again, here it's the image that creates a new reality, that shows a new possibility. And so here is an interesting scheme, because working on it, we thought it's a bit dumb to from the church to go down, drive over a canalized Mandel, drive up over the canal, drive down and drive up. Especially with the new bridge that needed to be higher for bigger boats. The slopes for bicycles would have been too steep. So we thought, can we not go up from the church with a very gentle slope, about 3%, take the Mandel out of its canalization and really create a nice bridge that suddenly reveals the valley. And while walking on this almost horizontal platform, suddenly the valley falls beneath your feet. And you walk back down with 3.4% towards the station. And so within this urban sprawl, again, as you can see, suddenly a very precise form is drawn and holds the valley together. And I thought it was interesting also by creating this counterform, if you like, while not even touching the valley suddenly becomes a structuring element of this small city. So we have started, or we have actually completed this first part. Here you can see the existing situation. The first thing we did was cleaning it up, keeping the church, the administrative building, and actually a very precise research on the limit between a castle and its park and the real city center. In the beginning, everybody thought the limit was right here, but actually we started excavating with the monuments and landscapes, and we could retrace the original line bringing the church in the middle of the plaza. Then we firstly made a green structure, ending the valley, since we're at the edge of the fluvial plain. We created these 2 blocks of trees, which allowed us to organize the whole program. For example, here we made a larger parking area, because of course, as elsewhere in Belgium, all public space is parking space. So the first thing you have to do is make a new parking space to liberate the existing parking space. But what was really important from the beginning was that it's not a green parking. It's a green structure, and you can also park. So it's first seen as a green structure that allows parking. Liberating space around the church, as you can see here, in isometric. And then the choice of tree, always very interesting when you work with cities, as in Belgium as in any other country. Because I wanted a tree that follows the seasons of the valley, but it wasn't a leafy tree. So I didn't want a tree from the valley. At the same time, I didn't want a conifer tree that would be too much in contrast. So we found this tree. It's in English a water cypress, in Latin a Metasequoia glyptostroboides, and it's actually a needle tree that loses its needles in winter. So it follows the seasons, but it is quite different. Some images we made during the process. A model. And then the construction, and I was quite happy to see that the contractor decided to first plant the trees and then actually make the hardscape around it, probably for some reasons that are mostly financial. But it was funny for me to see that he made the green structure first and then the parking lot underneath it. Also, these larger parking spaces are not always used, so we with the 360, we really designed them as a public space. A lot of attention to the materiality, the way it's designed, and even for this little kid, it's not looking like a parking space, but just a kind of interesting space with this weird gravel on the ground. This weird gravel has been designed to hold water and actually create reservoirs. We designed the foundations in such a way that rainwater would be kept in place to allow evaporation and infiltration. So a kind of very low-tech sustainability. You see how the seasons, even on this parking lot, suddenly become apparent, and how it can also be used as a parking lot. In the second phase, parking lot is lying behind this building. In the second phase, we did the plaza around the church, creating some water elements and actually creating public space for a municipality that has never really known public space. And it was really nice to hear that after the inauguration, the local Boy Scouts would, on a weekend, come to the water fountain and play in the water fountain. And that, for example, the new steps around the church have become a place where people would gather and would make appointments. This methodology that we developed in Belgium, which is based on this precise reading of what's there, what's existing, and trying to understand how we can reinforce it. We then, when we were asked to work in other countries, we reapplied it, and we're often very surprised by the results, because we were so used to look with a loop that suddenly we almost saw too much. So I will illustrate that with two projects, one in Bordeaux and one in Arles. The project in Bordeaux, which lies right here, it's very interesting. It's a territorial study. The municipality of Bigger Bordeaux asked a number of teams to rethink the territory from the standpoint of nature. How could the 55,000 hectares, which is the size of the larger community, how could it be a place for nature to exist? And we are leading a group of 10 members with l'AUC, with Office, with Transolar, Sébastien Marot, with the University of Brussels, with a number of specialized people, and are trying to through this cartography and through these different readings at different levels, we're trying to show a new way of how Bordeaux could develop its natural resources. So an interesting observation is that Bordeaux is the only, or the Garonne is the only river that's almost parallel to the Atlantic. All the other basins are perpendicular, which will create a very peculiar situation. It's also the largest estuary of France. It creates a peculiar situation because from the west, you have the plantation of the Landes, of the pine trees planted by the Dutch so many years ago. You then have the fluvial plain risk of inundation along the Garonne and the Dordogne. And in between, we have what we call the alluvial terraces, a kind of in-between zone, in between the plateau of the Landes and the fluvial plain of the waterway. And these three ecologies, as we called it, are cut by a system of affluents, of tributary rivers, again, draining the flat land of the Landes. And so it was really interesting that suddenly there was a kind of kinship or brothership between the study we did in Brussels and the one we did in Bordeaux, one constantly feeding the other. We were very interested in this system of these affluents that, as you can see, at a very regular distance cuts into the fabric and connects the plateau of the Landes with the Garonne. And so since there was not really any cartography about it, we had to redraw or actually go look for these rivers ourselves on Google Maps, which we did in the office. Sometimes we lost it and then found it back. And so we could make our maps ourselves, showing the apparent water and the canalized water. And thinking this could be a very interesting system since it is crossing through the built space and it is connecting the massive areas of plantation with the waterways. We said, it could be an interesting system to be a complement to the very radioconcentric city of Bordeaux with its consecutive ring roads and its radial system that connects it to the center. So suddenly, of course, this system is a parallel system and would give a kind of grid to this radioconcentric model. At the same time, just like in Brussels, many green spaces, many open spaces were directly linked to the secondary system. So we thought we could reinforce it and create also bicycle paths, direct connections following the secondary waterway all the way to the Landes. And then with Transolar, who did a reading of the climate, they found out that in summer the dominant wind comes from the west, flying over the Atlantic, over the pine trees, and actually being cooled down by the Atlantic, they could create a kind of natural ventilation at the scale of the territory. And this is very interesting. We are developing it as we speak, because suddenly, of course, we all speak about climate change and about global heating, but suddenly at the scale of the territory, we can look at solutions to counter that problem and use the prevailing winds, use humidity, use cooling as a way to engineer or to at least influence the climate. In Bordeaux, they were really interested by this idea because, of course, if the temperature rises, even if you have an AOC, a protected wine, with 2 or 3 degrees more a year, the wine changes its taste, of course. So this is very preliminary, but it's very promising, and I'm very thrilled, I'm very interested in the results of this kind of studies at that large scale. And so we then developed together with Office and L'AEC possibilities to at the same time preserve and develop the plateau of the Landes, to work with the risk of inundation and the wetlands around the Garonne, and especially create a status for this in-between zones of these alluvial terraces, which looks very much like Belgium, where you have the no problem with topography and just a kind of urban sprawl that's developing over there. And thus having this system of the three ecologies cut by the secondary rivers, this matrix helps to read the whole territory, those 55,000 hectares, in a new way. We've illustrated this with one of the secondary valleys, which you can see right here on the plateau of the Landes, cutting through the alluvial terraces before entering the city itself all the way to the Garonne. And actually, while walking and with the GPS, trying to follow this river, which is sometimes apparent and sometimes it isn't, we saw that many spaces are actually lying along this stream, which could be reservoirs, which could be parks, which could be social housing, or which could be even vineyards or sport infrastructure. So we thought actually in a very simple way we could reinforce these kind of pearls along this necklace and create a contemporary park system, a contemporary system where from one pearl to another a path is created. And to illustrate this, we made a number of images before and after showing that the sources in on the plateau could be made a bit nicer and used for recreation. Or here, for example, this very technical section for stormwater could become could be used to enhance the biodiversity. Or again, with the GPS, we saw that you can see a regard here. The stream was passing right there, so very easily we could open it up and give a very different feeling to that area. Likewise, for this part, or even for this reservoir, where, as you can see, the water is now conducted here, which of course could become, in a fairly easy way, a much more interesting space. So actually taking the water out of the very technical treatment and trying to see it also as a way to reinforce the nature running through the city of Bordeaux. And again here, similar to the 8 catchment basins in Brussels, we here have 6 larger tributaries that could be one by one used to reinforce, at the same time reinforce the connection from the Landes to the Garonne, but also create this alternative way of walking through the territory. And this scheme, as you may have seen, is one of the latest schemes we've made and has become the image of the exhibition. From the west to the south, Arles, lying on right next to the Mediterranean. And here, and this was really a kind of a shock when we started to look at the same aerial photographs, and you'll see this image in the exhibition. Suddenly we were like amazed by the richness of the patterns. You can see it here. This is actually the estuary plain of the Rhone. You can see here this was an ancient glacier that left so many rocks in the ground that no trees can grow. And here you have the Alpille, which is the southern part of the Alps. And I remember from the beginning I was very impressed with these 3 different landscapes lying right around the city of Arles. And we really took the time to understand these 3 geomorphical landscapes, La Crau, the Camargue, and Les Alpilles. And from the beginning, and I think almost day 1, we asked ourselves the question, what does it mean to have these these very different landscapes around the site on which we will work. And so we really took the time to investigate both from the air, but also from the car, also walking. I even learned to ride a horse to go to the Camargue, which is the only way to visit it. And I think almost for a year we were really trying to understand those landscapes and to see how they could have an impact on our project. For two reasons. One, to make something that would be anchored within its landscape, and it could be almost like a showcase of the landscapes around it. And two, especially because the client, the Luma Foundation by Maya Hoffman, her family protected most of the Camargue, and so it would be a kind of homage also to the fact that they cared so much about the nature, bringing it back into the city of Arles. Here you can see the site on which Frank Gehry is building this new center for the production of exhibition and art, and for which we have been selected to create the public spaces and the parks. At the reading of the site itself, what was interesting was that Arles was the second biggest Roman city during Roman times, and so the public space within the city center is very, very small, very mineral, kind of network of small spaces with, of course, the amphitheater and the theater. And that while walking out of the city, the public spaces become bigger, become more contemporary. And we could see ours, the Parc des Ateliers, having a similar size as the Museum of Arles Antique, which is lying right here. Going even further, we come into the new kind of development, housing development, sports infrastructure, or supermarkets. And so it's really interesting to make this inventory and see that, okay, we're lying right next to the very small scale public space, and right next to the car-oriented public space. How can we make a park that lies in between those two and actually bridges the gap between those two? Another reading, as you can see here, is that of the platform. The Parc des Ateliers was a workshop for the railway company. They repaired trains in these buildings that are now used as exhibition spaces for the rencontre. What was really interesting is that the whole platform has been carved out of the bedrock, so it's a perfectly horizontal slab that, like a wedge, has been pushed into the city fabric. Perfectly horizontal, perfectly sterile, a kind of concrete slab with just a number of buildings on top of it. And so it's really interesting to think this kind of canvas, this kind of wide space, where before trains were repaired, is now used to present and to produce art. As a platform, and since it's disconnected from the city fabric, we compared it with a number of islands. We talked about la possibilité d'une île, the idea of creating a different space because of the fact that it has been cut out of the bedrock and pushed into the city fabric. Another reading, and again, it's all these readings that suddenly reveal the possibilities. This is the reading of the existing trees, which suddenly could become a loop of trees surrounding the site of the Parc des Ateliers and connecting it with the major public spaces of the city. So we thought, okay, this is interesting. We can make two entrances towards the city from this loop of trees, because the rest of the site was walled. And suddenly, with these two connections, we call them entrance gardens, the whole site could easily be connected with the public space of Arles. And so these two observations were really key. One, to create or to keep the artificiality of the platform, and two, to connect it through the loop of trees with the rest of the major public spaces of Arles. We did this in a sequence of atmospheres. Here you see the the boulevard of the loop of trees running around the site, which we continued on a plinth. And this is the plinth where Frank Gehry's main building will stand as a beacon when you enter the city. There's a height difference since the platform has been carved out of the rock that we use to create this plinth. And on the plinth, you see the same height difference. This is the LP. We try to create this kind of mineral landscape. Mineral because, well, you have the hardscape around the building, and just like those trees would grow in those cracks, we try to make a mineral hardscape with trees with like the smallest hole pushing through this mineral carpet. So that's the first entrance. The second entrance is from the loop of trees that's running right here, where we created a series of gardens that actually thickens the trees that are running right there, and where we were much more inspired not by the LP but by the Camargue, and trying to create this kind of very wild nature on the site. While a third part would be the plaza, the main plaza, and there we were looking into reflection. We were looking into different types of ponds that could suddenly reflect the sky in the center of the site and create this happening. Around that, a number of trees planted in grids that actually remind one of the olive orchards at the foothill of the LP, and which work on the different patterns that create that create a design while actually being very, very rational land use. And so together we get this scheme that through the loop of trees is connected with the city, and that through its connection at a larger scale reflects the three landscapes that surround it. So it's this exercise of making this reading at a very high zoom out, and at the same time on the site itself be very precise. Coming back to Belgium, this is the last project. A recent project that we worked on for a consortium led by Jan de Nul, a new freeway connecting the N31 with the N49, or actually helping to create a better connection with the port of Zeebrugge, connecting it with the port of Antwerp. It's one of the missing links of the Flemish government. And here, after having worked in Bordeaux and Arles, and after having done a bit, or let's say a number of readings of territories, it was really interesting to come back to Belgium, to come back to West Flanders, and to be really impressed by the polder landscape. The polder landscape, which is of course a man-made landscape, and suddenly you understand that all the elements you see have been planted by man, and you understand that the flat land creates or generates a vertical landscape. And so here this reading became very important. Actually, you see it here, the different elements planted by man create this very peculiar vertical landscape, as you can see on this picture. You see it very well here, the reed, the willows, and the poplars. And actually those poplars are the mountains of the polders, creating orientation at a bigger scale. And so again, a very precise reading of the existing territory, and to understand that that man has made different types of interventions. These are the big canals linking Zeebrugge with Bruges. These are the smaller waterways, or here you come to the microsystems of water around the farms that almost at an equal distance were built in the polders. And so this reading, and again, every line we draw ourselves. It takes a lot of time, but I think it's the only way to to rediscover the landscape, and sometimes I compare it to those people on their boats when they discovered the Americas, drawing the coastal lines and drawing them over and over and over again. It's really interesting to see how cartography has grown and every time again would become more precise. So we would do the same, we draw everything all over again, which creates a database with which, of course, we can play, and with which we came up with a category of 3 landscapes. It's a bit the Crau and the Camargue and the LP of West Flanders, but it is the industrial, the infrastructural landscape. As you can see here, this canal was dug, those trees were planted. This is totally artificial, but there is a major element of the landscape of that area, creating these very strong lines in the flat landscape and becoming the orientation on the site. And so we try to make a kind of catalog or a kind of inventory of those elements made by man. Here, canals with massive plantations. A second landscape next to the infrastructural landscape we called the linear landscape, the linear polar landscape, where actually we saw that most of the main roads were planted. They were planted to reinforce the dikes. They were not continuous, but the kind of discontinuous linear plantations, as you can see here. And so here the toolbox or the inventory would be more like, is it a double alignment, is it a single alignment, is it the ridge of a dike? And the third landscape was, we called the fragmented polar landscape, where actually you would see all the farms with their hedgerows around it, protecting it against the wind and providing wood for the winter. You can see this very well on this image. And here the catalog would be the hedgerows around the existing farms, but also the new green screens that were being built around the industrial buildings that are taking over the role of those former farmhouses. And so with this inventory and with this reading, we would come up with what we call the exemplary landscape. And the exemplary landscape is very simply the best landscape that you can distill from the existing situation. So it's more about cleaning up and leaving out all the noise, and to come up with a landscape that is readable, that organizes the territory, and that gives structure to its organization. In 3 times, we investigated how the A11, a freeway, could create landscape. Because finally we said we are in polar landscape. Polar landscape has always been about making new roads, making dikes, planting trees, and digging out canals. So we're thinking, and it was really nice to work with the On the Nul, because they were very open to these discussions. We said we won't use landscape to hide a freeway. We will use freeway to make a landscape. This is the existing situation east of the Boudewijn Canal, where we proposed to use the typology of the hedgerows around the industrial buildings along the canal, and to continue the north-south alignments that link Bruges with the coastal cities. We worked together with Luxigon, specialized in visualizations, and we really tried to bring back a kind of Van Ruisdael, a kind of 16th and 17th landscape paintings, where suddenly the motorway and its bridges become a kind of normal aspect of the polar landscape. Between the 2 canals, the motorway will pass quite close to the village of Dutzele. So what we did here is we used the linear landscape, creating a number of parallel lines in order to block the view from the motorway, while at the same time keeping all the space open for or agricultural or biological interesting zones. You can see this here. You can see the alignments right there. And what we did here is actually a kind of interpretation of the historical way that landscapes, or the polar landscapes were made. You can see poplar trees one side, willow trees the other side, and the canal that has been dug. And so in the original project, the idea was to finish the motorway lying on a higher ground with an inclinated wall that would be planted as a kind of dike ridge. And we said, no, let's not see it as because this would be the end of the port. Let's not see it as the end of the port, but let's see it as the end of the polar landscape. And let's plant those willow trees, let's plant those poplar trees, let's have them grow, create a bicycle path, and suddenly from the polar landscape in a kind of very natural way, and this refers to the first images I showed about the A11, in a very natural way the polar landscape ends in these different alignments of vegetation. So this is the image from the bicycle path. The motorway is lying behind this wall, poplars, willows, and the open polar landscape. And the third part is the connection with the national road connecting Knokke with Antwerp, where here we propose to reinforce this line as a kind of third line next to the lines of the canal, plant 4 to 6 double alignments, and keep the road on the level of the territory, and have all the connection happening above or beneath this strong line. This you can see here. And so from the reading of the bigger territory, you can see the infrastructural landscape with the two canals that we are reinforcing along this road. You can see the linear landscape, and this is the existing situation, that we are reinforcing, as you can see, along the dike here and in these parts. And you can see the fragmented polar landscape that is existing, that we are reinforcing or proposing to reinforce in these industrial zones and along the farms that are lying next to the motorway. And we are as well making a motorway. But the real point in this project for us was to say we are making a landscape. We will plant more than 5,000 trees, and we will use the A11 to make a landscape better in the future than it is right now. This should start soon, next year, and will take 3 or 4 years to build. And then as a kind of bonus, the exhibition. So it's our first exhibition, and we didn't really know how to start it until the moment that we said, let's pretend it's not a building, but it's a landscape, and let's just do what we always do. So we started with a reading of the site. I'm right here, you're right there. This is the expo, the exhibition space. This is deSingel. And we said, let's push it even further, and let's pretend it's a landscape that thinks it's a building. And so how to reveal back its original identity, which is a landscape. So reading of the landscape, 2 different heights, one big space with a very high ceiling, about 6 meters, one smaller space with a very low ceiling, about 2.5 meters. A very rational system of lighting, and an even more rational system of beams. As a kind of technical gutter, these beams exist both in the ceiling as in the ground. And so we were quite puzzled by this, because as Katrien said, from the beginning, I really didn't want to make architecture. I wanted to make an exhibition without any objects, just to really to make a landscape, and actually to make a landscape in the building. And so we thought, okay, we have those 2 spaces, let's reinforce them. So we closed off this window, we made this wall. This opening, for example, since I didn't want to make any architectural choices, this opening is the minimum opening necessary for the ventilation to pass through. So it's not a decision. It's just the 22 square meters, if I remember well, that were necessary. We closed this door and opened these wide. And then we said, okay, now we have two spaces. And maybe one is a clearing in the forest, and maybe the other one is like a grotto. And then how to use these technical gutters and how to reveal the identity of the building while using its features. And the main feature were these gutters, especially since they were both in the ceiling and on the ground. So for the first part, we thought how to reveal the clearing in the forest. And we decided to use the beams to hang our landscapes, because in the first room it's really all about landscapes. Every image is a landscape. And since we didn't want to touch the buildings, we used the covers of the gutter that it has little holes in it. You should have a look at it. And so we use a little hole so that the cables are coming out of the holes, not touching the building. And so a number of cables are used to create 7 different lines. Since there were 7 lines, we decided to show the methodology in 7 steps. And actually creating a kind of valleys through this open space, allowing you to see different projects at the same time and to actually follow, for example, Arles in a kind of a meandering way. So this first space was all about imagining the landscape and showing how, from the aerial picture, from the framing, a landscape becomes visible, a landscape that can be explored, that can be read. So the second phase would be the reading of the landscape. As you can see here, the A11, Arles, Ingelmünster, Brussels, Bordeaux. From this reading would emerge the exemplary landscape. The exemplary landscape in the A11 with its three elements that we just saw. In Ingelmünster with its valley. In Brussels with its parallel axis. In Bordeaux with its 3 ecologies. From this exemplary landscape comes a landscape figure. The loop of trees in Arles, the infrastructural landscape in the A11, or the affluent or this tributary in Brussels. This figure is then translated into an actual plan that is all about riding the landscape all over again. To then come to the 6th phase, which is actually the visualization or the tests through images of both seasons and growth, and to end in the 7th line with the minimal expression of the project. So the first room is really about imagining the landscape, how a land can become a landscape image, while the second room, the grotto, where again we used the beams, attached horizontal elements to it to support a number of projectors. And here actually what we want to do is show the images that are produced by the reality. So it's quite easy actually. The first room is about how reality produces an image. The second room is about how a new reality, a new built reality, produces in turn an image. And the idea is really to, and that's why I actually wanted to keep this door shut, that you see that reality creates an image. This image creates a reality. This reality creates an image, creates a reality, and it's a kind of ongoing process where every new project creates a new reality that creates a new image. And here we decided to use the full length of the walls. So in the first part we don't touch the walls, here we project on the walls. And we show you both gardens. We make 1 garden a year. Why? Because it's fast, and because you can experiment, and because it's less expensive, so you can have a direct result. Because in public space, our projects look good in 2-3 years, but not at plantation. Because you travel. This is in the Caribbean. This is in Ingelmünster. And we decided to show triptychs, also as a kind of clin d'oeil or reference to the landscape paintings, and especially to create a kind of total experience within this grotto. public space, but also a large park, for example, in the south of France. Or, and this is the last image, the movie set we made for Philippe Parreno in Porto. On one of the walls, you will see these strange emblems or sigils, which is actually a bit the grammar of the projects of the office. The idea is that each one of these emblems is this minimal expression of a project, and especially through the research, it is for me, it is the desire of a land to become a landscape. Thank you very much.